Is it possible to have too much movement, too much weight shift in your golf swing? Absolutely. And what we're going to do is talk about how the pressure should move and also what happens if it moves too much. And we're going to focus on the backswing. So if first of all we go through the correct movement, when I set myself up, I'm going to have my pressure or weight, and those two terms, pressure shift or weight shift, are sort of used interchangeably. They mean much the same thing to most golfers. If we get into the semantics, they are different, but let's not concern ourselves with that. When I swing back to the top of the swing, the maximum pressure that I'm going to have on my back foot is going to be around about 70%. Now, I appreciate that you may not have any means of measuring that, but you can go by feel. So let's have a look, going by feel, at how we can work this pressure, how it should move, and of course, what happens if we move too much. So at address, let's say the pressure is even on both feet, so 50% on each foot. When I swing the club back, if the maximum pressure is about 70% on my right foot, it's going to be 70% about here in my backswing. So that's fairly early for most players. Most players are trying to continue to get that pressure to go further and further and further, all the way to the end of the backswing. That leads to getting too much movement and incorrect movement through your feet. From the top of the swing, or from this point here, as I continue back to the top of the swing, the pressure is already beginning to move toward my front foot. So let's say at the top of the swing, I've only got about 65%, or I've got 65% on the front foot. As the club swings down, by this stage, I've got about 80% on my front foot, and then at impact, it's probably still around about 80. And then as I continue through, the pressure will move to about 95% on that front foot. Now that sounds really complicated. However, if we think of just a movement like throwing, so my apologies, I'm a lefty, but I'm going to demonstrate right-handed. When I throw, if I'm looking to throw the ball a reasonable distance, I'm going to step forward as my arm goes back. So I've got more pressure here at this point, and then I'm stepping forward. So pressure's moving forward onto my front foot, even as my arm goes back. Now, if I'm playing tennis and I'm hitting a forehand with my right hand, I might step in toward the shot, and as I do so, my racket goes back. So I've got movement going back as I'm starting to prepare forward. So the backswing movement, or the preparatory movement, if you like, involves movement in both directions. Pressure's going one way, and the movement of my arm and hand, in this case, is going in the opposite direction. So it's not that different to golf. Its golfing application feels really different if you haven't been doing it. Okay, so let's have a look and see what we can do to try and get that movement more correct. So when I set myself up, if I just focus for the moment on my right foot, at address, the pressure's even on my right foot. So the pressure's even from heel to toe, and it's even from the outside of my foot to the inside of my foot. So my foot feels like it's really flat on the ground. When I swing back to the top of the swing, the pressure might move just a little outside of center, and it may move slightly back toward the heel, but not too much. If I move too much so that my foot starts to roll, then I haven't got sufficient time to get the pressure back onto my left foot as the club swings down. Because from the top of the backswing to impact is going to take, for most players, somewhere between 1/4 of a second and 1/3 of a second. For some players, a tiny bit longer. Either way, it's a very short period of time to try and get pressure moving to the extent that we want it to. So I can't afford to allow the pressure to move too much here. Not only will it cause my body to sway, but it means, as I said, you haven't got sufficient time to move forward. So here's a little drill if you feel like your body's moving around too much. If I put a club, this is a 5-iron, but if you use a more lofted club, the bottom of the club sort of sets an angle there. So if I put my right foot on that, I can feel that my right foot is actually angled in a little bit because of the head of the club. You're not going to damage your golf club when you do this. And then from there, as I swing back, the fact that my ankle is rolled in a tiny bit prevents my foot from rolling out, or my pressure from moving out toward the outside of my foot or toward the heel of my foot. If it does tend to move that way, I'm going to be hyper aware of it. So we want to have the feeling that the pressure stays even on the middle of that right foot. It'll probably also, because of the angle of the club, feel like it stays on the inside. Now, if you hit shots doing that drill, particularly if you've got the sense that your body's sliding too much in the backswing, you'll probably notice like an instantaneous improvement in shot quality and probably distance as well. So practice that movement with that club under your foot. We normally call it a foot wedge because pitching wedge is normally the club that we use to do it. But it's a brilliant way to avoid the movement going too much. And what I said earlier about the feeling of the pressure moving, starting to move forward, then going down, that's what most players will do. So let me play a shot for you. And then you can be the judge as to how well that pressure moves. Well, the shot went all right, so I hope the pressure movement was good. So practice that movement, especially if you notice that you're sliding around too much. And like I said, you'll find that you'll get an instantaneous change in the point of contact on the ground because your body's more stable, the quality of the contact, which means you'll hit more good shots, and then the distance because the quality is better.